All right, well, good evening, everybody. Let me call this meeting to order. Tonight is a special board meeting in which we'll be addressing a new board policy on independent study, COVID protocols, and the demo of Old Dana, among other agenda items. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
A motion.
Have a motion. I'll second.
Thank you, Nelson and Israel. Wendy, a vote, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
All right, let us put our flag up for the flag salute. Dr. Harbeck, if you'd be so kind.
Sure, please stand. Please place your hand on your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you. Well, let me welcome everyone, our community, our cabinet, anybody watching at home, and of course our volunteer board members. Thank you for coming and joining us at this meeting tonight. We now will turn to from the public, and in accordance with our new practices and board bylaw 9323, we will have individual speakers shall be allowed 3 minutes to address the board, and we will limit total time to 20 minutes. In our new protocol, you will see a timer on the screen that will go from green to yellow to red. 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, it will go yellow. At 10 seconds, it will go red. And we ask you to adhere to the time limits out of respect to everyone else. Wendy, do we have any public comments?
We have 2 attendees. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button at the lower portion of your screen. Looks like I don't have any public comments this evening.
All right. Then let's move to our primary discussion item, COVID-19 testing options at Dana Middle School. Dr. Silvers, I turn it over to you.
Sure, and I apologize for having some technical issues earlier, but I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so at the last board meeting, we had a chance to talk about Wiseburn Unified School District's Back to School 2021 strategies, safety protocols, health and safety protocols. Those protocols have also been or will be shared with all of our sites principals who will be sharing them in town hall format as well with their families. So just sort of a recap, but I wanted to capture a couple of the items from that, particularly around the area of health and safety, and touch a little bit on the testing, current testing status or protocol that we have. So before I get into that, just to capture that we know variants are changing. We know that the health and safety of our students and our staff, our community at large, are really critical. It's one of our pillars, it's one of our assurances, and we also know that COVID-19 is such a fluid situation, in the fluid circumstances, do require us to pivot as needed to ensure as best we can the safety of all stakeholders. So when we start looking at health and safety, I just want to be clear that we're looking at a sort of a cache of different or a set of different variables and different processes that are very important for the overall health and well-being of our community during a pandemic. So one is masks. And masks are extremely important. It's literally what the Department of Public Health would deem the most important barrier between a human being and an aerosol-based virus like COVID-19. So the wearing of masks is required on our campuses. That's for adult students, vaccinated or unvaccinated. Masks will be worn pretty much at all times. Of course, there are exceptions, mask breaks during recess outdoors, as students are eating and drinking. In those types of scenarios, obviously, we would have a little bit of a reprieve from the masks. But other than that, again, despite your vaccination status, masks would be employed at all school sites. The second is our ventilation system, and I just want to really thank this board for the investment in air purifier systems that really rival the air purifier systems that are on our airlines. that bring in purified air to all of our classrooms, again, to help mitigate the spread of the airborne virus. Then vaccines, and I'm gonna sort of skip that for a second and talk about that. Actually, I will talk about that. We know that vaccines actually and have really helped steer and basically stop the spread of COVID. And at the very least, 99.9% of cases that involve hospitalization or serious illness are those who have not been vaccinated. So we do encourage any individuals 12 and older to get vaccinated, and we do believe that that will contribute to the overall health and well-being of our school community. With that being said, the governor did release an order just about over a week ago that did mandate state employees. He did mandate that all folks, employees of school districts, to include staff and teachers, be vaccinated and show proof of that by October 15th. So we are, as a district, in the process of collecting all of that information from our staff. And I know Dr. Dougal is working with our labor partners as well as with individual staff to be able to collect and disaggregate that data, be sure that we're following up on that. So that's the vaccine piece. Where I was going to skip over is COVID-19 testing, so I'm going to get to that in a slide here. But other areas that we're looking at is limiting indoor crowding where possible. Again, we understand distance as best possible. I'm sorry, as much distance as we can and still keep full classes and keep schools in session is what we're going to aim for. So there's no specific guidance on a mandatory distance, although recommended somewhere between 3 feet and 6 feet when possible. Again, also assuring that students are able to participate in full instruction throughout the school day. So obviously we can only fit so many desks in a classroom. We fit a certain number of desks in a classroom. We want to spread those out as best we can within the confines of that room. And then we have other health and safety protocols. I'm just going to bring this screen up, and that's our daily screening. And this is a self-attestation. The reason why I bring this up is because we have changed and tailored, and I'll thank Dr. Dougal for doing this, updated the questions that we would ask our respondents, every single solitary student, staff member to complete. This does come to us. We do keep it on sort of a dashboard that we can access. But really, this is that time to take the deep breath every morning for all of us. Again, from district office staff, we're doing this as well. Just gives you that time to pause, check, make sure that as you go through the process, that we're prepared and in good stead to be able to be in school that day. So it's not a perfect system, but definitely a system that causes pause and reflection in the morning prior to students and or adults coming to school. Any questions about the data, just so I don't jump too far? So COVID-19 testing, in terms of recommendations at this point, as we've seen throughout this process, the district, we would recommend to this board that the district adhere to all directives from the Department of Public Health. And to date, there's no directive from the Department of Public Health for a particular frequency or procedure for asymptomatic testing. That's to date. The district does continue to collaborate very, very closely with not only our local districts, but also districts across Los Angeles County. And we're doing data sharing. We're sharing best practices. We're sharing documents, written documents, and the like, so that our entire response as a community, as a group of school communities, is solid. So just want this board to know that we're definitely not doing this in isolation. We're working with our local neighbors as well for best practices. Second is that we do offer testing 2 times per week. And this is for any staff or student who needs to be tested, feels they should be tested, wants to be tested. And we do strongly recommend that all unvaccinated students utilize our testing site. I believe that message went out today via several social media platforms, email to families, encouraging our students who are unvaccinated to get tested. Again, strong recommendation from the district for that. And Dr. Dougal, do you want to share a little bit about that process, just so I don't miss something?
Sure. Like Dr. Silvers had said, we have testing twice a week. It is at Dana Middle School, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 12 to 6:30 p.m. Many of our parents and staff members received an email from Fulgent If you did receive it, you can register to take the test. You only have to register once. And if you did not receive an email or you were unable to complete the registration, we encourage you can register on site at the day of testing. So we encourage anyone, once again, students that have not been vaccinated, to please go and get tested. The opportunity is there twice a week at Dana to get tested.
And then we do know that there is, likelihood that the pandemic could change. Obviously, we hope it changes for the better, and we want to prepare for any scenario that we may face. So in the coming days, the district will be sending out consent forms to all of our families. These consent forms would then offer the district the opportunity to be very proactive in our testing. It would offer us the opportunity for those students who have consent from their caregiver, parent or guardian caregiver, to be able to engage in a randomized testing or an asymptomatic testing process and protocol. So definitely want to have that out. Again, trying to set all of these sort of dominoes in a row so that we can adjust, adapt effectively and seamlessly to anything that the pandemic throws our way. So that's our next step, really. And that's why boldface underline. This is a new information. This is something that we've created over the last few days since our last board meeting. So I just wanted to highlight that this wasn't included in the last presentation that I shared with this board.
And when will this be going out?
We're aiming end of week at this point, Dr. Goldman. So it's just getting it loaded up into School Mint, into our program, so that families have an option to do that. But I'll get a firm answer on that, shortly, and send that out to the board.
Cash, another question on
of course.
Before you continue, forgive me, on going back to the Qualtrics testing. In the protocol last year, people had to show their check. Will we be doing that again?
We're not. No, we have not required that. This is more the self-attestation phase, where it's more for families. Ultimately what we were doing last year was checking for a green checkbox. I don't think we stopped anyone with a red X, because nobody came to school if they had a red X or it didn't show as a red X. And so, and we were not seeing any no fevers. So to date, throughout the entire process of the return to school, and except for a mistake, there was no red X that needed to be responded to, and there was no temperatures registered above, the 99.9 that would then trigger us to have to filter those students out to isolation.
I'm vacillating on that. Thank you.
Should I continue, Dr.? Should I continue?
Yeah, please continue.
And so we do want to continue to focus our mitigation on our mitigation and prevention strategies. We have a full host to complement of PPE, as I shared last time, cleaning and disinfecting, and ventilation. And so just to be clear, we're very much adhering to those enhanced cleaning protocols that we did last year, sanitizing high touch points, and also utilizing our foggers to disinfect our rooms on a daily basis. That'll happen every day in all of our sites, all of our classrooms, all of our office spaces, so that we start the day fresh every morning. And that is it. I just have a Q&A at this point. And so I know, Dr. Goldman, I don't know if you want me to explore any other options. You mentioned vacillating on the Qualtrics.
Well, I'm just questioning if we're asking people to do it, but we're not checking up on it. I'm wondering where is the accountability? So would people just not do it? And then it's becoming not very effective.
So I'll take that, Dr. Silvers. Qualtrics, we actually have a dashboard on the back end, which lets us know who has completed the Qualtrics survey each day, who does not have a red, who does not have a green check mark. And so we do stop students from being on campus or staff members from coming on campus. So we aren't physically checking as they're coming in, but principals and site administrators and secretaries have access to the dashboard, and they are checking in the morning as students are coming in to see who hasn't cleared, and then we will be following up with those individuals.
Makes me feel a lot better. Thank you. Your report also, and then I'll stop and let other people. I have many more questions, but I'll let others speak in a minute. You mentioned 2 days a week we'll be testing. I just want to clarify, as I understand it, those are Tuesdays and Thursdays at this point. I don't know if that was stated, and if it was, forgive me.
Correct. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 to 6:30 p.m. at Dana Middle School. Today was our first day of testing. And so we started testing today.
Dr. Dougal, just for the purpose of this meeting, could you clarify too, when we test, how long does it take usually for the results to come back?
So the company has let us know that it takes 12 to 36 hours to get results. We are hoping for the 12-hour turnaround time, but it may take up to 36 hours to get results. And those results will be reported directly to the patient, or in this case, the parent of the student, as well as to myself as the COVID compliance officer, so that I am aware of all test results. And if there is a positive test, then we can begin contact tracing and, quarantining and self-isolation processes begin.
Thank you.
And so the requirement to be tested weekly is at this point only for teachers and staff who have not been vaccinated. Is that correct?
So that executive order from the Department of Public Health goes into effect October 15th, right? It was written on October 12th or August 12th, but it goes into effect October 15th. So we are beginning the process of collecting vaccine information, as well as putting the process into place to ensuring those unvaccinated employees begin to test.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Appreciate it.
And one more thing here. One of the challenges with best practice testing by Fulgent, which is being used elsewhere as well, best practice as I understand it, is this delay in results potentially. We also have, as I understand it, rapid test ability, and I don't know that was mentioned in the presentation.
Correct. So when we do the Tuesday, Thursday testing, that is what we refer to asymptomatic testing. So, right, just folks getting tested as needed. We do have the ability to do symptomatic testing with rapid tests at each of the school sites. And so should there be a positive case, a close contact, someone that's been exposed, that's not on a Tuesday or Thursday, we have the ability to conduct rapid testing as well.
Thank you.
And that's also why we want to get out ahead of the consent forms as well, so that as we have that, because again, we can't even use those rapid tests with students without having that consent form on file. So we want to make sure we get ahead of that as well.
So where will the consent forms be, I'll use this word, stored? Will we have them in an electronic form? And Dr. Dougal, will you maintain them? Who maintains those consent forms?
So the consent forms, we will be sending those out to the parents through School Mint, which is our our system that we use with all of our families, and so it'll be stored in that learning management system or student information system.
And who has access to that system?
That would be administrators as well as district office administration as well.
Okay.
And Eileen, just you're the expert at this. There's levels of permissions as well, right? So we can manage who has access to what, obviously, so we can maintain health records as super confidential.
So keeping that in mind, because I think it's really important for parents to know, I'll repeat my question. Who will have access to those permission forms?
So, individuals. The names of, yeah.
Well, I mean, is because Dr. Dougal is maintaining the vaccination information as PII, I think, for the staff and teachers. How are we regarding permission forms from parents for their students? Or from the caregiver or whatever, right?
Yes. Nisha, do you want to take that? Or do you want me to answer?
So in terms of the consent forms, the access will be given. It'll be given to administrators to see who can get tested, and then folks that we don't have a consent form for, obviously, we'll have to follow up with those parents to get testing done. Only site level administrators, and so in this case, even health forms and such on campuses, that's who has access to that, is our administrators.
Okay, so you mean principals?
Principals.
Correct.
Assistant principals.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And our cabinet.
I think, Ms. Kaneda, you're asking for security protocols, HIPAA adherence, and making sure we keep this data safe.
That's exactly what I'm asking for, because I don't want parents to feel hesitant to sign forms that get put into some electronic system without any assurance to them that these forms are protected and are available only to people who need to know.
A
So we
school
would
med
add-
has lots of confidential information. I mean, this is something that we take a deep, a lot of pride in making sure that it is confidential and that we're caring. I mean, from anything from custodial records for students and those types of things. So we're very, very careful with that information being out there. And as Dr. Dougal said, administrators on the site would be just the principal and assistant principal. You need 2 people to help manage those kinds of numbers for the most part. And then
Sure.
our district cabinet, just to be specific. It was so a total number of, 8 to 10 people will have access to it only.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other board members? Thank you, Joanne. Any other board member comments or questions on the protocols as designed currently?
I have some comments and some questions as well. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Silvers and cabinet and staff for providing the option here for the testing on the Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think it's a great service that we're able to provide for parents to give them some peace of mind on whether or not their child has COVID. It's a resource where they can come in and get tested. By the same token, I think that for those that choose not to get tested, I think it's a little bit counterproductive that if only some parents choose to test their child and others don't, because you really don't know who may have COVID in a closed classroom. As such, I would have a recommendation that we move towards requiring and providing access to testing on a mandatory basis, whether it be weekly or biweekly. And of course, we do need to look at what's feasible, what's doable in terms of cost. And when I say cost, it's related to how much funding we get from the state, because as everyone knows, we get funding from the state, whether it's COVID funds or ADA. So it's not a pot of money that we have, but I think there's some options here where we can provide options for testing. Maybe not for the first day of school in terms of mandatory, given the proximity of it, but I would like for us to move towards requiring and having mandatory testing for all students, because the state has already mandated testing and actually the vaccine for teachers, as Dr. Nisha outlined for October 15th. All those forms need to be put in place. I don't see how students would be any different. I would see that as also protecting our teachers, since we're requiring them to come in and be fully vaccinated. Why wouldn't our students be as well? I see this as no different than other vaccines and immunizations that we require as a district. In fact, it's on our website. For example, we have polio, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. And I think there's a couple of other ones. It was quite a lengthy list right on our website. I see COVID-19 just as one of those that we're going to be adding to this list eventually. So I would propose that we move forward and investigate what's feasible for our testing, Dr. Silvers, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly for mandatory testing. Don't expect an answer right now, but I think we need to be more, if we can, more aggressive, if you will, in fighting COVID. I think eventually the vaccine is the solution because testing is really problematic in terms of just the implementation side of the house. And there's a lot of unanswered questions as well, right? A perfect example was how long does it take for the test to come out, right? If it's 12 hours or 36 hours, you have a student in there that could potentially have COVID, right? And you don't know it for 36 hours or so. I would prefer to still move forward with the testing, because at least we would know in 36 hours versus leaving the student there indefinitely and not knowing for the duration of the semester until everybody gets the virus. I would prefer, even if it's on the long end of 36 hours, I would prefer to know then versus not knowing at all. I'm sure there's other questions and some implementation pieces, but I would like for us to move towards a mandatory COVID testing and eventually a mandatory COVID vaccine for all students. I realize that the vaccine for students under the age of 12 is not even available right now. So that's why I use the term move towards, not because we can't even do it now, even if we wanted to. But for those that we can, I think it's prudent for us and it's the safer course of action for us. And the reason I say that is because our students were going to be in a classroom for potentially 6 hours in one classroom. And yes, we have the ventilation, open windows. We've done everything we can to do that. Nonetheless, they're in a closed environment. So I think that would be the next precaution that we can take. And if any step that we can do that to help stifle or prevent the spread of COVID, I think we should do that. So those are my comments. And maybe we can have a further discussion as to next steps to look at that, like implementation and costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Israel?
So I liked Roger's idea. Of course, the devil's in the details, right? So how do we do it? How do we, handle that many tests per week? How do we process them, get the results, then act on it? What happens if a parent chooses not to have their child tested? What happens to that student? Can he come? Can he not come? All those questions need to be answered and be very clear before I would really want to do this. My understanding of other districts is they haven't done it very successfully and it hasn't gone very well. And so we'd like to make sure we're getting prepared to do it if we see the need, but I don't know if we're there yet, and we definitely need a lot more information. I'd like to also mention, Blake and the team, that outdoor learning is a good break from the classroom, and we should explore that as much as possible and have time away from the classroom as whenever it's feasible. So just throwing that out there for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Israel.
I
Nelson,
had
go
a
ahead.
quick comment, Neil. I concur with both Roger and Israel here. Obviously, this is a complicated matter. One suggestion for consideration, I know I had a conversation about this with Neil and Blake, possibly if we look at a pool of possibly implementing a mandatory COVID testing, I would suggest that maybe we look, since we're going to look at this possibly, it's difficult to look at the entire district right now, maybe we can focus and prioritize the children 12 and under that have not had an opportunity to be vaccinated. Perhaps we can take a look at that, and maybe we can implement in a smaller process, if you will. So just one suggestion. Obviously, as Israel says, the devil's in the details in terms of how we implement this. But along the lines of Roger's comment, this is a step in trying to protect the kids as much as possible.
Joanne?
Sure, thank you, and appreciate everybody's comments. This is really good discussion, and appreciate Blake's overview at first and Dr. Dugal's knowledge about all these items to keep us focused on what's available and what's already in place. I want to make sure people understand that even if we decide as a board, as a district, about mandatory testing, we cannot test children who are under the age of 18 without parent consent. So I don't want anybody to go away from this meeting in our community and think that we can make that, we as a board can make that rule and that it would override parental consent, because it does not. The other thing I want to make sure people understand, and appreciate Roger's mentioning on our website that we do call out certain vaccines as being mandatory for attendance at public schools. These are not Weisburn rules for these vaccines. We are merely adhering to the law by requiring these vaccines. This is not a Weisburn Unified School District decision about measles vaccine, mumps, measles and rubella, polio, and so on. These are, I believe, federal law that these vaccines are required for students to attend public schools. If parents and families choose not to have their students vaccinated with these vaccines, they cannot attend public schools, but that's up to them. Once again, this is choice. We adhere to the law at all times, and we do not overrule individual rights of families and parents make decisions. There are consequences to all decisions, but we do not operate outside the law. So I want to make sure people are aware of that. So when we talk about mandating vaccines or mandating testing, keep in mind that we still have to follow whatever permissions are required and whatever law is in place in order for us to exercise those. Those would be recommendations. They would not be mandates unless they are law. So I want to make sure people understand that we're having good discussion here, and it's really important. At the same time, we do not operate outside of the legal boundaries for the definitions of these actions. Anyway, so those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Any other comments from the board? All right, Dr. Silvers, let me attempt to do a recap, and board members, please fill in the missing blanks. As I understand it, a general consensus, and again, chime in if you don't agree, is that we agree with the current policies of the district that as presented by Dr. Silvers and the cabinet. We absolutely will and must adhere to DPH protocols and exceed them wherever possible. We're putting our focus specifically on mitigation strategies and being vigilant there. We are providing the opportunity for 2-day-a-week testing and ensuring we have rapid testing available once people return and sign off on consent forms that ideally will be going out this week. We also, I believe, have a directive here to explore mandatory testing options on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and bring that back to us as to what's viable, and at the very least prepare for that possibility if it's mandated from above. What did I miss, guys?
You got it.
I want to make sure too, Neil, that our community understands this is a joint effort. We can only do what we can do as a board and as a staff. The community has to participate in this follow through. So as Blake pointed out earlier, there's going to be consent forms going out. If you agree with what Neil just talked about, if you're out there listening to this or you're going to read these minutes, if you agree with perhaps going forward with mandatory testing at some point, mandatory vaccinations at some point, we need your participation is not just important, it's mandatory as parents or caregivers of the students in the district. So please understand that we are looking for your participation, and we're looking for your cooperation with the board and staff to make this health environment or healthy environment available for all of our community.
Thank you, Joanne. And it does take a joint effort. We will only beat COVID if we work together, and we'll only have a safe school year if we work together. Probably should clarify exactly what that consent form is asking for. Perhaps Dr. Dugal, you could clarify that for us one more time, just in this case at this time.
Sure. So the consent form that parents will be signing off on is for their child to be able to get tested, what it should, if and when mandatory testing becomes our practice, then the consent will then allow for students to be tested during the school day without the parent at the site. So they will be able to get tested at any time while they're on the school campus.
This consent would also allow for rapid testing in the event of suspect conditions or symptoms, correct?
So if the student is showing symptoms, if the student has been exposed or is deemed a close contact to someone that tested positive, yes, this will give us consent to be able to test the student on site.
Thank you.
Neil, the only other thing I would add in terms of that, the follow-up for the analysis before we would make such a decision, right, is if a parent does choose to not consent to the mandatory testing, should that be, what would be the options for instruction and teaching? I know tonight we have an independent study program, which I think would be really, well, it would be extremely important for parents to know what that option would be, because if it's mandatory testing and they opt out of that situation, then what is their alternative to continue instruction? So I'd look forward to the presentation or conversation on the agenda item for the independent study a little bit further in this presentation or meeting as well.
So Roger, I can, if it's okay, can I just add a couple comments to that?
Sure, absolutely.
Now. So in terms of independent study, so the trick or caveat with independent study is that you actually have to be in agreement. There's several parties that have to be in agreement. So the parent has to agree, student has to sign off, essentially, parent, guardian, and student. The administrator, so there's a master agreement, and then the district has a kind of a final sign off. Without those signatures, a student cannot, you could lose ADA because essentially, I mean, that's part of the process of confirming, if you will, a student that chooses to be an independent study. I only say that because should a parent decide not to sign a mandate for test, or not to, I'm sorry, fill out our consent form for mandated testing, there's still some question from our legal team that we need to take a look at, and we don't have clarification on that yet as to whether or not. We definitely know we can't mandate that student in independent study. What we're trying to understand is alternative. What are our alternatives should a student opt out of that?
Got it.
Part of the equation from the earlier conversation. So thank you, Roger. Thank you, Dr. Silvers.
Sure.
Dr. Silvers and/or Dr. Dugal, do either of you have any further questions from the board on what's happening next or what we're asking of you? And if not, we'll move on.
None for me.
No questions.
All right. Thank you all for that conversation and this really challenging time relative to that. Let's move to our action items. A general action item, general 5-point run, receive board policy for the second reading and adoption. This is to the independent study conversation we just were having. Motion, please.
A motion.
Thank you, Joanne.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments needing further deliberation here?
I want to make a comment that this independent study is really important, especially in the context of the conversation we just finished, because it gives our community choices. And that's what's really important in education as a basic opportunity for folks, is to have choices for how that education is available and utilized on the part of families and students and communities. So I really respect that we have this option, and I'm happy to offer it to our community in the way that Dr. Silvers just described, with the partnership and the approvals that need to happen on all sides.
Thank you. One other point to buttress that is that it's important for folks to know that this independent study is not distance learning as of last year with Zoom. This truly is independent. I don't know if Dr. Harbeck or Dr. Silvers, you'd want to give us a little more clarity so people can understand what this will be.
I was able to share at our last board meeting some independent study facts. It is a program that's intended for students to learn independently 4 to 6 hours on their own a day. There will be interaction with a credentialed teacher who will be on campus should they need to drop in or pick up a packet or receive some additional instruction. I would say that all students who are enrolled in this should be very self-motivated on an independent study program, but it is a great option for families that are looking for that. And every site administrator is meeting with families individually so that they're very clear on what this program entails and answering all their questions.
Thank you. And as you last shared, 98% of our students and families had opted to live instruction in person. We're only talking a very small number of students at this point.
That's right.
Which, by the way, makes a virtual distance learning option not even viable, as I understand it.
So 2%, Neil, is that about 50 students, Dr. Harbeck?
We're at 47
Oh.
as of today. TK through 8.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Vote, please, Wendy.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you.
We may have lost Mr. Mora.
Oh,
Oh,
he's
there we
here.
go. Thank you. Let's look at facilities. Item 6, motion, please.
I'll move to approve.
You have a second?
What are we moving? 6-1, 6-2, 6-3? Dr. Silver's advisory, do these independently?
I would.
Yeah, they're large. Let's
Yeah.
do 6-1, approve agreement with AMCO contracting for work on the aviation demo project. This is the most expensive of the three, or biggest investment of the three. Now that we're clear, we should have a motion. I don't remember who.
Oh, okay. You have a motion to approve. This is the demolition of Old Dana. So I'm actually very excited to see this moving forward.
Indeed. And
Yes,
a second, please.
You have a second.
Thank you, Roger.
I have a question, and it's not just for this particular item, but all three, 6, 1, 2, and 3, which all have to do with Old Dana demolition. I am also in favor of all this, of course. I am happy, just ecstatic that we're able to move in this direction. I do have a question though, and Blake and I talked about this on email some, and we agreed that I would bring it up in the meeting. And that is that the statements of work in these documents are not very descriptive. They allude to a statement of work, but we don't actually see the statement of work with the documentation that we're being asked, that we had a chance to review. So that was a little concerning to me because I'm approving for work to be done, like the plumbing and the electrical and low voltage. I don't actually know what these contracts are what these folks are going to do. I know the general topic of their work, but I don't know what, for instance, what are the plumbing guys actually going to do when they come over there? So I want some reassurance somehow that the statements of work that go with these contracts that we're approving are actually appropriate to the work that needs to be done. And I know who reviews that, who knows that to reassure me that that's the case.
Blake, do you want me to jump in here?
Yes, please. Thank you, Dave.
Sure. So we checked with our, Joanne and board, we checked with our attorneys, and the contract reflects what was in the bid documents. So whatever the response in the bid documents were, that's the scope of work that we're going to hold them to. And our attorney was fine with that. So what I probably lacked or failed to do was to send you the responses of the bid docs. But that's ultimately it. So the scope of work has to reflect what they responded in their bid docs. And if you want, I can certainly send those bid responses that these three contractors submitted to us.
I would actually like to see that. I don't want to hold anything up because I know we need to make sure we want to make progress here. But I mean, I don't know if the rest of you folks have any questions about that. I understand this is customary for the board to see these more abbreviated documents for approval. At the same time, I feel relatively competent, which I know the rest of the board is as well, to at least scan those documents and understand if we, and decide if we understand what's being done by each of these contractors and if it looks sufficient to get the work done. So
I did just want to make a quick comment. It doesn't necessarily answer your question, Joanne, but it is customary to see these forms. What we're approving tonight are general condition forms and bid forms that are very typical when a contractor responds to those bid documents. Actually the documents that we're signing tonight were prepared by our attorneys. So these are our attorneys that prepared those documents that we're actually approving tonight. And then there's references in those documents to the specifications and drawings that you do not see. And I think that's where you would definitely find the detailed scope of work for each specific trade. So this is a construction, it's a CM multiple prime, and that's why you're seeing the separate trades, which we have not seen that in a long time here before our board.
I appreciate that, Nelson. And I would also argue that whereas attorneys are fine to put documents together that agree with each other, they still don't understand the construction language and the construction or the demolition language to actually interpret it as being complete and appropriate. Right. So that's my question. Not that these documents actually adhere to each other, that there's consistency within the documents, but that the statements of work are actually appropriate to the work that's supposed to be done.
Yeah, completely understand. That's why I said I'm not answering your question.
So I have a couple specifics. Go ahead, Joanne. Let me let you finish.
No. Okay, so my question, and maybe it's Dave who's going to answer this question, is what sort of expertise, who reviewed the responses, and I guess it goes all the way back to the definition of the work to be done. Are you comfortable, or who is it on our staff that knows the statements of work completely enough to assure me that what's in these documents that we're approving is sufficient to demolish Old Dana and make sure that we, do it appropriately and finally?
Joanne, let me see if I can help guide a response to your question here for both Blake and Dave. One of the things that we did in one of our prior meetings and also through Facilities Committee, there was a recommendation that came before the board to approve Erickson Hall as a construction manager. So
Right.
Erickson Hall would have been the entity, the construction management firm that put together these bid documents, the plans and specifications that led to these 3 packages. So it's their responsibility, their work to put together the scopes such that we know what those contractors are going to do and demo, and then how they would leave the site without getting into specific items like the nuts and bolts of the electrical and switchgear and all those things. But the answer is that Erickson Hall, who works for Wiseburn for us as the district, they're our representative on a day-to-day basis that will be managing the contractors, all 3 of these that are on the list here. So Blake and Dave, if you have anything else to add, that's how I see it. And in my understanding, that's why we brought on Erickson Hall.
Yeah, I was going to actually add that as well, that Erickson Hall would manage this. And I know me and Joanne did talk talk over email about this a little bit. And I know, thank you, Nelson, for clarifying, and Roger, but we do have Erickson Hall on, I believe, on this call. If we'd like to bring them over just to ask a couple questions of them too, I think that may be helpful. So if the board's okay with that, can we bring, I think it's Justin's online, is that correct?
Correct. Justin, one of the project leads from Erickson Hall is on.
Great. Okay.
Maybe bring him over if that's okay.
If we could slide over Justin. We also have another person with the last name Gates. So we may have Matt also. So
Matt's on.
please slide them over. Yes, both of them.
Last time we put Matt on the spot, I think appreciate him coming back.
I remember that was in person too, or
Yes,
felt like
it
it was
was.
in person. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
Hey,
evening.
Justin.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I'm Justin Sinnott. I'm with Erickson Hall. I'm the project executive. So I run all of our Orange County and Los Angeles work, including this project here for you guys.
All right.
And I will second the statement that Dr. Silvers made, that you did put me on the spot last time.
You actually danced pretty well. We gave you some credit, so well done.
So
yeah, we're open to any
we're
specific
hearing the concerns, and Justin has put together the bid documents in conjunction with our abatement consultant. And part of the requirements was a mandatory job walk with all of the trade contractors. So every contract that you're going to approve or vote on tonight, the contractors did a mandatory walk to understand the scope of work, and Justin ran those walks. So with that, I'm going to let Justin talk a little bit about how he put the packages together and the scopes of work.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So the big one obviously is the demo abatement, the AMCO. Like Matt mentioned, we have a hazardous abatement consultant who came and sampled and tested hazardous materials throughout that building, put together a report. So all that is included, legally disposing of the hazardous materials, and then obviously the demolition. But on top of that, he is including complete grading of the site, and then a dust control, a soil binder of sorts, a product that he sprays on that hardens the soil so that we don't have dust flying. So that's included in there. He's also providing temporary fencing around the site with green screen. Really just the whole scope to keep this site clean, clear, and protected until the new project starts. So that's the big one. That's the demolition and abatement. The plumber and the electrician are going to work in conjunction with the demolition contractor to safe off the building. So we've got water, we've got gas, we've got utilities running to this building that need to be cut, capped, and protected for the demolition, or we make a big mess. In addition, the plumber has got a HVAC contractor under him, removing all the freon from the HVAC units. You've got a handful of rooftop units on top of that building. So we've got a licensed contractor under him in that plumbing package to remove the freon from the units and legally dispose of them so we don't get in trouble. So that's all in the plumbing package. The electrical one's a good one too. That's we actually had 3 different walks with the electricians to make sure that we got that scope clear, because you've got an adult learning center and a couple other buildings adjacent that are fed from the same feed that feeds this school we're going to demo, and we need to keep that up and running. So in that number, the electrician is rerouting as necessary, reworking the panels and the feeds to keep the adult learning center and the adjacent buildings up and running, and then safing off the building we're going to knock down, not only power, but low voltage and fire alarm, because all that's tied to the adjacent buildings next door that need to stay up. So actually 3 pretty thorough job walks and some bid packages put together, the scopes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that overview. I was particularly concerned with abatement and then the cap on sort of the interaction between this site and other sites that are still going to be operational.
Oh, yeah.
And making sure that all of that is part of the statements of work that we're approving tonight. So I really appreciate your being here tonight, and I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a couple of questions for you, gentlemen. First of all, I'm the first to point out when costs exceed reality or projection. I want to point out you guys live within projection, and it looks like the numbers came in well. So very pleased with that. A question about the contingencies. We do have significant contingency funds in here. What are we looking at that could impede or could start to encroach on these funds for contingency? And then the second question, I'll stop, is what will we be left with? Our community would like to know, just to be sure, yes, we'll be spraying it, but will the fence stay? What will we be left with when we're done? So let me stop there.
Yep, I'll start with the second question. What are you left with? So we included in that demolition bid package of year of rental. So complete perimeter fencing and green screen. Green screen is that privacy screen. Keep the honest guy out, and that'll stay up for a year until we get that next project going. And then in terms of the allowances, the contingencies, the biggest one in the demo abatement number is $150,000 allowance for, in this case, is going to be unforeseens. We did a very thorough hazardous material walk. We opened up walls, ceilings. We poked around as much as we could. So we're pretty confident with that. But you never know when you start getting underground and some things that we don't see. We want to make sure we're fully inclusive of anything that could come up with this demolition. And then we got the same thing with the electrical. We put an allowance in his and the plumber, just making sure, we start digging and something pops up that we don't know. We got to make sure we keep those adjacent buildings up and running and functional. And we want to make sure we've got what we need to be able to do that. So we feel very comfortable with the numbers in there. And then I guess the third question was the budget. We actually had 8 bids for the demo electrical, 8 bidders, which was very exciting for us. It's a great turnout, very competitive numbers. Number 1 and number 2 are almost the same number. So it's telling me we got some competitive bids. So hopefully that answers the question. In terms of how we're leaving it, I hit on the fence, but we're gonna leave the site flat. It's gonna be graded, but we can't just leave it dirt, with the wind and the rain. So we're gonna put a soil binder on it. We've got a pretty nice product we've used in the past that we'll spray on that thing and maintain it. And then I'll also mention, I didn't mention before, but in the demo abatement package, your site is just under 4 acres, which requires a stormwater prevention pollution plan. So basically we're protecting the environment. We protect your storm drain inlets in the adjacent areas. We got a state permit that's included in that package. There's gonna be quarterly monitoring, rain event monitoring. So they're gonna come out actually until your vegetation grows or we start the next project, just to make sure that we are complying with all the laws and regulations of the SWIP is what they call it, Stormwater Prevention Pollution Plan.
If I could add on, there's a couple items with the unforeseen, with the plans being the way they were, the existing as-built, and certain pipes you just cannot pick up with the utility locator, transite pipe being one of them. So we always keep an allowance for those kind of things. One of the good things with the turnout we had with the trade contractors and the bidders is they've all worked with us in the past, so they understand we're going to be stewards of your money, the district's money. Change is a change, but they have to show that it's entitled, and we're going to make sure that the pricing is fair and reasonable before we bring it to the district for approval.
So it sounds like encroachment on the allowances really is what's under the dirt right now.
For the most part, with buildings that old, sometimes you'll start running into some PCB oil at transformers and things like that. But for the most part, if it's underground, that's where the unknowns are going to be.
Kind of
Thank you.
a few quick questions. In terms of Justin, you mentioned this, in terms of the site, once you're complete there, and with regards to the fencing, is the fencing going to be cored in? So is it cored into the ground?
The panels are driven into the ground, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want any issues with them moving or blowing
Right.
They make a mess. So yeah, we're going to drive those things into the ground, but right around
Okay.
the perimeter of the site.
And the maintenance requirements, you mentioned the soil stabilization, which I think is great, and also the SWIP. Is it right now, what do we have there? Is it a year? Is it longer than that, or about a year now? In terms of the maintenance requirements, is it just, we bought basically about a year?
The product that we wrote into the bid package, it's good for about a year. You will, if we run a little longer than that, we'll have to maintain it. We'll have to respray it, but it's a pretty cost-effective product for how long it lasts and how well it stabilizes the soil and keeps down the dust. But yeah, about a year, you're going to want to really look at it.
Okay, just to my colleagues, that'll be something that we have to consider if we go beyond that. And then the last one is with regards to, there's been some recent legislation with asphalt. Did you guys test, there is some asphalt that's going to be demoed on this project, I believe, in that parking lot. Did you guys test for asbestos at all?
No, we haven't. Typically, when you run into the asbestos issue, it's with the petromat. And we did not see any evidence of that with all the alligatoring. So I don't believe that we'll get into that issue. If it was an active site that was running buses all these years, I'd be more concerned with a petromat because that's typically the way you'd maintenance that parking area.
Okay. Yeah, just take a closer look at that. There's been recent legislation on that, and that's one that could definitely certainly come up on us.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay.
Thank
you, guys.
Thank you, Nelson. What is the soil treatment cost? Obviously, in a year it's going to be different, but at this time, what should we be looking at that if we do need to do that again?
I'll have to get a breakdown of that.
What did we spend at Los Alamitos?
Yeah, it was about 3,400 for a.
So we actually use this product to stabilize excavations for foundations because of the way the construction was. The holes actually had to stand up for about 4 months. So going with a horizontal application, I could see it lasting really the full year because we were using it for vertical stabilization, and that's a lot tougher to maintain those walls to stand up. But we can get you a price breakdown and definitely give you the product information, but it lasts a good long time. Arizona Department of Transportation uses it on their highways to stabilize for dust and wind blow.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. And then finally, I don't know who this is for. It might be Roger Nelson, might be Dave, might be our two gentlemen from Erickson Hall. What's the magic of 113 days? Where does that put us? And a $2,000 penalty for exceeding that timeline seems awfully light. Is there any flexibility? Is that industry standard? Thoughts there? I don't know who I'm asking.
Typically on a building that you're putting in place, anything under about $10 million worth of building runs about a $2,000 to $2,500 liquidated damage clause. So for a demolition package to have damages of $2,000 a day, I think we made it clear we want them done and to meet the dates.
And then where does 113 days take us, and when does that start?
That runs us just about to the end of the year. It was the goal there. We put together a initial preliminary schedule, tracking actually this board meeting, and then some notifications that we need to submit through AQMD to get started, and then that puts us right about to the end of the year.
Excellent.
Comments, board, questions?
I just want to thank both Justin and Matt. Thank you for the update.
Yeah, no problem. Of
Yeah, same here. Thank you.
course.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank Erickson Hall and the team too. They're very, very professional, supportive. Thank you for all of your professionalism and contribution so far. Look forward to working with you.
Yeah,
This has
we're
been
ready
a
to go.
project coming up for a long time, so we're counting on you guys.
We're excited.
Thank you
gentlemen.
both. Have a good evening.
You bet.
All right. Thank you all.
Take care.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Subaki, let's take a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you.
I think given the conversation we've had and the relevance of these two, I think we can take 6.2 and 6.3 simultaneously.
I would
I'll-
like,
Oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Joanne.
Nelson.
no, go ahead, Joanne.
I'll motion since I was the one with the questions before. I feel okay about it now, so I'd like to motion. Thank you.
Are you motioning both, Joanne?
Yes,
Okay.
6.2 and 6.3.
Okay, I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Done.
Vote, please, Wendy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Moving to consent, 7, 7.1 through 3. Can I have a motion?
I would like to motion 7.1 through 7.3.
You have a second?
Thank you, both of you. I didn't, the details were pretty unspecific as to what these two master contracts were for. I'm assuming, can you just give us a quick, I don't know who to ask. Yes, Peggy, please fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Peggy.
So the Salient contract, that's 7.2, is one of them. I'm sorry, I'm not even sure which one is for the nurse. One is for, 7.2 is for a district nurse. We are trying to hire a nurse. We don't have one. We've been posting and we don't have one. And the other one is for a teacher. We have a need for another RSP teacher at 138th Street, and we've posted for that and have been unable to fill that. And so we did hire somebody through this agency.
Great. Thank you.
I apologize. I'll be clear.
Seeing no other comments, Ms. Subaki, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Personnel, open to a motion for 8.1 to 8.3.
You have a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Roger. Seeing no comment, Wendy, a vote, please.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our agendized item. Is there any more business at this time anyone wishes to raise? Then I will call this meeting at 7:03, adjourn the meeting on Tuesday, August 24th, with thanks to everyone. We do need a brief close. Let's reconvene at 7:08, 5 minutes. Does that work?
Perfect.
See you then, everybody. Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Good evening.